president of the South Dakota League of Women Voters. And welcome, Amy. Nice
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Let's just start off, if you don't mind, with just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Myself, I am a lifelong South Dakotan and grew up in Sioux Falls. Attended Augustana College back when it was called college. And I am currently a financial advisor here in Sioux Falls.
Okay, great. Tell us a little bit about the South Dakota League of Women Voters, or the League of Women Voters. What is that all about anyway?
Sure. The League of Women Voters was started 6 months before the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which we're celebrating our 100th anniversary of both the League and the 19th Amendment this year. And the League is nonpartisan. We do not support or oppose candidates or political parties at any level of government. But we're always working on vital issues that are of concern to our members, as well as the public. And we encourage informed and active participation in the government. And we work to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influence public policy through education and advocacy. We are in all 50 states. And in South Dakota, we also have some local chapters in Sioux Falls and Pierre and Aberdeen. And then there's one in the southeast corner that encompasses the Yankton-Vermilion area. We also have some members at large across the state. And things that we do, we're probably best known for our voter registration efforts. You see us all around at public events. We go to employers, just about anywhere, and we're registering voters because that's the first step in the voting process is getting registered. Beyond that, we do legislative coffees where during session, the legislators are able to talk to their constituents, and the constituents can hear how the legislators are leaning, and then they have the opportunity to talk to their legislators so they can provide their side or their stories and make sure the legislators are being responsive to their constituents. Other things we do are educational forums for topics that are current and relevant. So we will, for example, this year we have some ballot issues, and we're trying to figure out some ways to do virtual forums because of the virus, and educate the public on both sides so that they can make an informed decision, but it's their decision. So we do lots of things. We have a website called vote411.org. For all the young people out there, 411 used to be what we'd call for information. So a lot of young people don't know what 411 means anymore, but Vote 411, candidates can log in and answer some questions, enter some biographical information, and put up their website, social media, things like that, so that voters can log in and find out who their candidates are and what they stand for. So it's a great website that has a lot of information on what is exactly on your ballot. And it also has links to how do you register, how do you absentee vote, things like that. So what kind of ID do you need to bring to the polls? It really is a one-stop shop for voting.
Can you say a little bit about why is it even important to vote? Maybe, I don't know if everybody understands that. Can you talk about that some?
Sure. I like to say that the person who, paraphrasing a quote from Mark Twain, the person who does not vote has no advantage over the person who cannot vote. So we have this right available to us. And in order to express our opinions, we go to the polls. And this is how our policies are made. These are things that affect us on a daily basis. And the importance of voting is to make sure that your voice is heard.
Do you feel like, can you make the connection between a person's voice being heard and them voting? Because for some people, that connection is not very clear.
Sure. Well, here's the deal. Some people, if they vote and their candidate doesn't win, they feel their voice has not been heard. But there is a connection, as you said, with how many people voted for their opponent and things like that, that candidates do take into account. And so they can then reach out to those people and make sure that their opinions are being heard, and they can hear both sides of stories and policies and make sure that the best policies are being put forward.
Well, I'm going to just take a kind of a side turn here because more people have joined us, and I'd like for people to sort of like, let's say, go around the room and introduce yourself. Just say, what your name is and where you are, and if you have what's the reason that you vote or don't vote. Okay, so we can go around the room. Let's pick on Jessica because she's new.
All right, my name is Jessica. I'm the new development coordinator for the South Dakota Humanities Council. And what was the question? Why I do vote?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I vote just because, as Amy was saying, that it's a really great way for me to, have an anonymous way to express, things I want to see in the community or at the national level. And so I always make sure to pay attention to candidates' platforms and things like that, so that if it's a similar thought that I have, that I know there's a candidate representing me.
Good. Betty? Your mic's not off, Betty.
Now it is. Thank you. I've always voted as soon as I was old enough and could register. My dad was pretty politically astute, and I saw him working in his career had to do with U.S. Mail Service, and he was a railway mail clerk, and they had their own organization. So I knew he interacted with Senator Munt and Senator Case and McGovern. So that just, I was right in line to be prepared to do that. So I always vote. And only last year, I think, did I vote in absentee because I really was absent for some reason. So it's very important to me.
Mm-hmm. Good. Ann? You're at Mike.
Because you can hear everybody, you just think you can talk to everybody.
Yeah,
Too.
exactly,
Sorry about that.
yeah.
I'm Ann Vollen. I'm the executive director of the South Dakota Humanities Council. And I have just recently moved back to South Dakota. And 2 weeks ago, I registered to vote, and I am so excited. I just can't tell you how much that means to me. Of all things, my earliest memory is of going out to Pierre, South Dakota, and I just have, this very fragmented memory of being in the car and then being at Pierre and seeing the pond next to the Capitol. Both of my grandfathers were active in local politics, winning, local Senate seats or whatever seats it was. Sorry, I'm vague about that. And so it's just from my very earliest memories, literally, I have thought about politics and what it means to be part of the community and how you get to be part of that larger community because you vote. So I'm really glad to be here and getting to hear this discussion today.
Lawrence? The other Lawrence? You got to turn on your mic there. I think in that corner, there you go. Now you're on.
Okay, all right. Yeah, well, like you say, it's very important for citizens to get out and vote because without a democracy, that's the basic principle, how everybody can participate. For the past 20 or more years, I've been pretty much involved in pretty much all of the political events here in South Dakota. been involved in various initiatives and referendum petitioning processes, submitting petitions. I have been volunteering at various candidates running for office on their campaigns. So I've been pretty active in the election process.
Thank you. Barb, are you there? I think you have to turn on your speaker and turn on your mic and then turn on your, okay, there you go. Something in there. Barb's on the phone. Is that working? Your camera's on, but your mic's not on, Barb. Or maybe she's blocking it out. I don't know. Well, let's go to Naima, then we'll come back to Barb.
Good morning.
Good morning.
If you hadn't noticed, outside of the fact that I'm like Mary Queen of Scots, I am an African American person. And so my whole idea of voting has been interesting. I was born in Chicago, grew up in St. Paul. And after I became an adult person, I had several people that I was friends with. One, Chris Crutchfield, doing Underground Railroad, and some other people. And, you know, that was right around the Minneapolis Sound and whatnot. And I went to a delegate meeting, and he was quite qualified, comes from a really big family and whatnot. And he was not voted because, oh, look, there's so-and-so, let's vote him in, and then we'll have somebody that we can talk to. And it turned my stomach. I did not vote. I watched over the years as they got rid of polling places where African American or people that look like me or lighter but brown-skinned people, 765, and then you had to drive someplace, and then I watched people go through what would be our modern day busing, where everybody got together and took a bunch of people over the church bus and so on and so forth, and the elderly were pushed, and it just turned my stomach. So fast forward, moved to Elkton, South Dakota. That's a whole nother long story. Love it. And I voted for the first time in my life in Elkton because I was able to make a difference. And that feeling of being able to make a difference in Elkton, South Dakota is what has catapulted me into being more active, being more aware, and cherishing the fact that I can actually walk to my voting place and or assist someone to get there, because it's, you know, we're 736-7. And so that was my experience with voting. It is still my experience with voting. And I also understand, I understand when she was saying that then you get the right to, or whoever the person that we're talking to, we get
Amy.
the right, Amy, okay, that one. We get the right to, hi Ann, sorry. We get the right to have conversation with the folks. But the thing is, for me, is that I have the right to have a conversation. I don't care if I voted for you or not, because you are representing me. And doggone it, I have had conversation with all these Republicans and said, excuse me, hello. And then, of course, I use my minority status to say, don't you want somebody that looks like me? Oh, I'm not ashamed at all. I am not ashamed, because there's so many things that need to be done. And it's a difference between me saying, don't you want someone that looks like me? And the person saying, oh, let's get them. They're rich and we can get some money. Sort of a little bit different. So that's my whole understanding about voting. And my hurt to know that there are so many people in so many places that aren't being allowed to vote because they can't get there. Their voting places have been taken away, all the mail and so on and so forth. And we sit here excited because we have voting places. What are we gonna do about the rest of the country that is suffering? And we might have someone reelected that is going to sit on bills or go around bills or do all these other kinds of things. So I throw that in there, and I'm not ashamed. I just think that in one way, when you talk about privilege, here in South Dakota, we do have privilege. And I think that we, at some point in time, might have some way of being able to use it. I had somebody, and I'm going to finish, I had somebody the other day, yesterday, as a matter of fact, because it's in the Star and Tribune, talk about some of the things that are going on. And her text to me was so long, I had to turn my phone sideways and go like this, drink a little coffee, and then go back to it, because she was scared that our governor would spend that kind of money on some of the things that are being spent, And she said, well, can't you do something about it? I said, well, I don't have her cell phone, but I'm just kind of, and say, hello, it's me. So I know that was long, but yeah, it hurts, people. It really, really hurts. Not just what's going on in South Dakota, but what's going on still. And I'm 71 going on 72 years old. Oh, look, let's have this one. Oh, then we can get some money under the table. I mean, they were not hiding it. They were doing it right in front of my face. And I was saying, hello, don't you see me? And they looked at me like, you don't matter. What the heck? You represent me. Don't, okay, is Barb ready now?
Barb, can you turn on your mic? We can't hear you because your mic's not on.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Okay, now there's.
Okay, I must have a slow internet connection.
Oh, okay.
And anyway, so I'm happy to be able to join you again today. Tomorrow I'll be moving to a more permanent living environment in Sioux Falls. So I'm really excited about that. I'm still in rehab, but I'd be happy to share my voting thoughts. I think it was always presented to our family that it was a civic duty to vote. And I can remember as far back as 1952 watching the political conventions on television, which on little, like 8x10 little screens, and thinking about how exciting it was and how exciting it was to be an American, and how I must have been all of 6 years old wanting to participate in the process. And throughout my life, I've been blessed to be able to do that, attending both national conventions of both major political parties as a reporter, and then actually participating in the nuts and bolts of politics when my husband worked for the mayor of Hartford, Connecticut. So I think, and I really understood the mechanics of voting and getting out the vote, and how important it was that find ways to overcome some of the issues that some of the people have shared with us today. So I think it's always, like I said, it's always been a civic duty to vote and to be part of the process.
Okay.
Next.
Yeah. Let's see. Thea.
Hi.
Is it Thea or Thea?
Thea. I
Okay.
answer to both. It's okay. Hey, I grew up in a family that was very involved in state and national politics. And so I voted and have voted in my life for many different reasons. I think the first time I voted when I was 18 because I could, and I was excited that I finally could do that. And just the fact that you could go in and to the poll place and they knew who you were and you could push some buttons or punch some little things on a card was really exciting. I have also voted to cancel people. I voted because I thought, okay, at least my one vote will cancel my next door neighbor who's voting for someone I don't like. It's probably not the best way to do it, but I have done it. And lately, there's lots of other reasons too, but lately I find myself excited to vote because of all the women who came before me who worked hard to get us that right to vote. Right now, I feel proud to vote and I'm excited to do it because I really do believe it makes a difference.
Thank you. Alphonse, are you there? There you go.
Yes. Well, it won't let my phone access the camera, but okay. In any case, you can hear me fine, I suspect.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So my story I'm from New Orleans originally, and my story begins with my senior year in high school. This was in 1965, and it was just before the Voting Rights Act was enacted or signed into law. I was a part of a group of high schoolers who could read, who went around to register older Black people who did not learn to read and could not write in order to read to them the affirmation that they had to, or swearing that they had to mark their X with. So knowing that history, it has always been a really important thing for me to do, is to participate in that long fought for activity of having the voices of all the people, and especially people who had been denied that voice for so long through all kinds of machinations. But as a practicing adult, I like the idea of being a practicing adult. I also think it's quite interesting, in order to be a part of your community, that you would need to participate in it in the ways in which you could through representatives. So I've always believed in the idea that if we're going to be a representative democracy, that we need to be able to actually express to our representatives what it is that we think that's important. And as I got to be older and then travel around the world, I've learned that in some countries, in order to be a citizen, it's mandatory that you vote. Now, I know that that's not really in keeping with a lot of American ways of doing things, but I absolutely love that idea that in order to say that you're a practicing citizen of the country in which you live, you must vote. You absolutely must vote, which I would hope implies that you also have to pay attention to what it is that you're voting about and who's going to be representing you, et cetera, et cetera. In any case, that's my connection to the idea of voting and why it's still so very important to me, given that high school behavior of, helping those who, my ancestors who were not able to vote before.
Excellent. Melinda.
Good morning. So yeah, like everybody else who's already spoken, I do take voting seriously. However, unlike many of the rest of you, I was not raised in a family that was involved in politics in any way. However, all of us were raised to be aware of and to appreciate our right and responsibility to vote. And so we were taught to take that seriously, to be informed, to be knowledgeable, and then to cast our vote, as we saw fit. So yeah, it's a civic duty, I think, and one that I'm proud to have the opportunity to have.
Thank you. Lee. Microphone, Lee. Mike. Oh, it's still off. There's a little thing you can click on the, yeah, there you go.
Did. Yeah, I just did. No, I'm taking it from that. I was a teacher at a young age, and I could only teach 3 months while pregnant, and then I had to quit. And so I got the law changed. That was the beginning of worrying. This is 50s. Thinking about the rights of women and voting. And then there were people said, well, do whatever your husband does. Well, that bugged me. So when I was teaching, one of the things I did was wanting to teach the students how to vote, but also how to look at the backgrounds and the issues independently on your own, looking at each issue and writing down in a chart form what you think is important about this or this or this. And then as it was announced who the candidates were and what their positions were, but you had your own positions. And having done that, then we actually had they had to register to vote. These are the students. They were 14 years old. And then they would have the final election. Not all that registered voted, which was true. But when they voted, it was very interesting because they got opposite from what their parents had voted for in the elections in the past years. And because of our discussions, they were discussing this at home with their parents. And the parents had different votes that year, and two prominent people were defeated. So what I'm saying is voting is so important if you want things done. And I just guess I've been very active in speaking my thoughts and minds and wanting to educate people about voting and the importance of it. I was in another state and I came back to South Dakota and have had my eyes opened because I did not realize how slanted some of this stuff is.
Thank you. Ryan, we left you out.
I'm Ryan. I work with the South Dakota Humanities Council. I've been a longtime voter, and I worked in journalism for quite a few years and covered a lot of politics, at which point voting became even more important to me because I realized some of the things that can happen if you don't vote for the right person. Yeah. I don't know how much more I want to expand on that.
Okay.
Some things.
Okay.
Full disclosure,
Yeah.
I was on the city council in Elkton. Okay, Ward 1 council. But that was after I decided I was going to vote. And but full disclosure.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, I think we have a diverse group of voters, and I'm glad to see that all of us are voting. But there are some people who they don't vote. So I'm going to go back to Amy now. And Amy, I'm sure that in your quest to get people to vote, you've heard at least a few excuses, if and what people might say are reasons, but I would say excuses not to vote. What are some that you've heard?
It varies. Here in South Dakota, we hear a lot of people who just haven't thought about it. I vividly remember being out at Jazz Fest doing a voter registration event and standing in front of our booth, probably 30 feet out, was this young couple. I mean, they looked like teenagers to me, but everybody does nowadays. And they were looking at our tent. It said voter registration and League of Women Voters, and they would whisper to each other, and they would look at the tent and whisper to each other. And then finally they walked up to our tent and said, I think we want to register to vote, but we don't know how to do it. Great. We walked them through. They got to the point where they needed to declare a party or that they didn't want to be associated with a party. They said, we don't know which one is which. And so we explained a little bit about maybe who was prominent at that time in that party. And and the other parties, and then they went, oh, okay. And then they put down their choice and were excited about it. But really, they were so hesitant to even walk up and talk about it that it really brought out to me how much we need to talk about it and how much we need to make it a process that's easy to understand and easy to access. And the League of Women Voters just being around and having the opportunity to register really is a vital piece to just starting the process of voting. And a lot of people don't realize how much their daily life is affected by who they vote for, especially on a local level. We focus quite a bit on the national politics, especially during an election year where a national election is happening. But the local politics of who's on your city council can greatly affect your life. Who's on your school board can affect your children's life in a large piece of that, as well as the state legislature. We really do need to pay a lot of attention to those local people, and not just when it's time to vote, but also when they're enacting the legislation, the laws. What are they doing? What are they saying? What information maybe are they missing that we can provide for them? And so being active not only during an election year, but also throughout the process is vitally important. And not everyone knows how to do that. And so the part that League plays in that is providing opportunities for people not only to hear their candidates, but also to hear what's going on after they're elected. How do you contact your city council member? How do you talk to your state legislatures? And all of that can demystify the process and make it real to a person.
Now, that's what League of Women Voters are doing. There are other people on these calls who may, on this Zoom call, that may not even have heard of League of Women Voters before. What can people do to encourage their neighbors? Maybe they're not a member, should be, could be, but they're not yet a member of League of Women Voters. But can you talk a little bit about the power that individuals have to influence other people to vote?
Sure. One of the things we encourage is to get a voting plan. And one way you can do that is talk to your neighbors. How are you going to vote? Are you voting absentee? Can we sit down and discuss it together? How are you getting to the polls? Do you need a ride? Just simple things like that can really encourage your neighbors to get out there and make it more individual. Get a voting partner, whether it's your spouse or your family or your next door neighbor or somebody you're in an organization with. Make a plan to vote and maybe celebrate voting afterwards with a dinner or drinks or something. Make it an event. That's one way to do it. Encouraging people to vote through yard signs. I know a lot of people do that. And just plain talking to our neighbors, which in the pandemic we're in right now can be tough. That can be really difficult if you are vulnerable to the virus and you don't go and talk to your neighbors. As the weather gets colder, we aren't outside as much talking to our neighbors. So really to reach out becomes harder in these times.
That's, I suppose that, like that's kind of, I would say the ground level. Are there other things that, the kind of things that people can say to their relatives and people who are not, that's enabling people to vote. And that's the base level. But let's say somebody is resistant to voting or just not really ready to think about it. Are there any things that you've come across that people can do, subtle little things that they can do to get people to at least consider it?
That's a good question. I would love to hear other people's ideas, and we can certainly put those into practice. A lot of times just being out and about with the League of Women Voters button on, people will stop and ask us questions. So subtle things of just talking about politics can encourage other people to talk about it as well.
I'm going to pick up on that. Anybody else have any ideas that they can suggest to Amy about ways to get people who either haven't really thought about it deeply, or they reluctant or resistant even to voting? Are there things that you can do, like, not just, I don't mean things like confront people, because often I find that has dubious results, but we do influence people all the time. I mean, we cannot not influence people. So what are the kind of things that we can do individually that might encourage people to at least consider voting, and maybe do it?
This is Alphonse.
Uh-huh.
So, after you vote, at least in Colorado where I am, after you vote, you get a little sticker that you can put on to wear throughout the day that says, I voted. I wonder if there might be something that you can do before that says, I plan to vote. Will you? Or hope you will. Something to that effect.
Mm-hmm. And I should say that, since you brought that up, Alphonse, at your local Kinko's or copy store, they often have, if you go in and ask them, they can make you those kind of buttons individual, whatever you want to say on them. The other thing is there are iron-on t-shirts that t-shirt things that you can make yourself, and you just go into like a Staples or Office Max or something like that and tell them that you want the iron-on t-shirt makers, and you can they'll sell you a pack of them. Sometimes, depending on the size of the store, they'll sell you one, and then you can take that and take your iron and basically put anything that you can print out on your computer, you can put on that t-shirt. Okay. So you can make up your own signs, and they do make bumper stickers. You can get one-up bumper stickers, say whatever you want. So those are things that you can do, as Alphonse, to extend on Alphonse's idea. Anyone else has ideas that they might share with Amy?
This is Betty speaking from Aberdeen. Oh, excuse me, Lawrence.
No, I'm not.
Well, the other Lawrence.
Oh, the other Lawrence. Oh, okay.
Too. We were talking over each other. Well, I'll go ahead and say that something that I am doing, thanks to our League of Women Voters suffragette reenactment we did a couple of years ago. Someone had and brought these buttons that said, I am woman, hear me vote. And it's very eye-catching. And so I do wear those kinds of things. And the other thing I do is I kind of live on Facebook sometimes, kind of. And I think I represent voting and participating in democracy and government. I go to my local council meetings, except now that I'm quarantining myself. But there's a lot of good things that can be done via social media. That's the only one I'm really active on. And I do feel that that makes a difference, because then people know they can come to me and ask or tell me something that they are doing or share. So that works for me, I think.
Lawrence, you were going to say something?
Yeah. At Brookings Democrats, we have ordered 100 yard signs talking about early voting, to get out and vote early, which we'll be kind of putting out around the community. So that's one way we're going to try to encourage people to get out there and vote early. And of course, during a lot of campaigns, I have signs in my yard for various candidates and issues, and sometimes people will be asking me about these too, which is kind of encouragement to get them to vote also.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else has any ideas they could share with Amy about how we might encourage other people to vote?
Don't do like I did. I had an Obama sign and a Jim Gilkerson sign and almost caused 2 accidents. One of the things that I think might work would be acknowledgement of folks that were like, or that are like how I was, being able to do the dominoes effect. Because growing up in St. Paul and having those things happen, you know, you get jaded and you forget about local. And here in South Dakota, local is, I mean, Brookings is local for us because of the fact we're in Brookings County and so on and so forth. But people might not understand why it would be necessary to be involved in the greater scheme. And I think that if being able to say, okay, yeah, I can understand that. You can even say, well, you know, Naima was like that, but blah, blah, blah. It doesn't, you know, I have no problem with that. But being able to acknowledge that and say, and have you, but, and furthermore, here's what else could happen, so on and so forth. Yeah, I look at what's his face that hides stuff under the desk, but, you know, being able to work here at some point in time, it might be a wash and get things actually done and hold everybody accountable. And I think that that is one of the things that got me saying, holding myself accountable for holding them accountable.
You know, along those same lines, Naima, you know, one of the things that people will say is my one vote doesn't count. And I think having the anecdotes about how people won or lost elections by one or 3 or 4 votes, you know, I think it really brings home, at least for those people who need such kind of clarity, you know, knowing those anecdotal stories could help to make that pitch. Yeah, so I don't know whether, you know, if you guys, Amy, if you guys have any of those anecdotal stories, especially if they were like just a list of these people over the country, these are the people who won by, let's say, 10 or fewer votes, you know.
That's a great idea. We should get that. A lot of what I hear, though, is more on a personal level. When somebody is directly affected by legislation that is coming forward, as Lee talked about, there's with the, you had to quit working once you were 3 months pregnant at one point. So once you're personally affected by something, it tends to help bring you forward. It tends to make you want to speak out. And then what I encourage people to do is talk to your legislator. It may be a different legislator that brought it forward or a different city council member that brought that idea forward, but talk to the one you can vote for and who is supposed to be representing you, and explain how personal that is to you and how it affects you in your life. And that can be a great way for them to kind of dip their toe into politics.
I just
hearing your stories.
I want to insert here in what she was saying, the personal stories. My one idea I have for her and is whenever you're in a group, whether it's a church group, whether it's a social group, and you say you're not in a group, well, you are on Zoom many times now, but I'm in like neighborhoods, you know, and that's kind of what I think might be suggested. People know you personally. And even if you come out with a reputation of, oh, she's always got something that she's trying something new. And I just say, have you registered yet? You need to get registered before you can vote. You might want to check into it. Or I talk to the garbage men that come by when they deliver or when they're getting the trash today. I mentioned it to him as he's picking up the recycle. I said, hey, have you registered to vote? He said, no, I never thought about it. And I said, why don't you? Why don't you make this your first day to vote? And he just smiled, the biggest smile you can imagine. He said, I might do that. I said, if you do, tell me next week.
Oh, nice.
Beautiful.
So-
that follow-up really makes a big difference, you know.
You really, and yeah, I've been known that I don't have somebody I don't know because I do it. I did it in the grocery store yesterday at 7 o'clock in the morning. All of the workers, everybody I saw. So they're going to say, what is this woman doing? Is she nuts? Well, I don't care. We need to do this now. This is an important election and all of them are, or something like that. Just know that you have more power than you really feel that you do.
Absolutely.
That's why if somebody comes to my house with a gun, I will say I have my mouth.
Well, you know, you bring up a really important point, Lee. And we as humans, we give up a lot of our personal power. Then we say we don't have any. And then we often give up the power that we have without understanding that the more you exercise your power, the more power you have. You know, if you don't exercise it, it starts to recede. Then you just become like the sword in the scabbard, you know, like, and then pretty soon it's a wooden sword in the scabbard, and pretty soon it's just a scabbard. It's nothing, you know.
Exactly.
So you have to exercise your power if you're ever going to have any.
I know the day that it was, not this year, but I went this year. A year ago, it was 30 below wind chill. And they said, where are you going at 6 o'clock in the morning? And I said, I'm getting on a bus to go to Pier. You're what? What if your car doesn't start? So somebody took me and said, I'll pick you up. I'm afraid you're going to freeze because I'm more than the 8-0. Anyway, I did, but I met many senators and representatives. And I would see them later. They would remember, oh yeah, you were the one that, yes. And I said, you better think about it because that is what is important. Thank you. Thank you guys for letting me in.
You bet. It's our pleasure. Now,
may I just interject real quickly, Lawrence? I have discovered the power by going to Cracker Barrels. I started going kind of haphazardly some mornings. I thought, oh gee, I don't want to bother. Now I have, because I've been there and I have spoken, and now people have come and sat at my table, people who wouldn't have come if they hadn't known I was there because we were friends or whatever. There is power in that, and there's power in numbers. Yes, exactly. Don't underestimate your own power. And I've even learned to speak without yelling.
Yeah.
That's a great skill. That's a great skill. But we have the pleasure of having a younger person on this call. Don't look away. I'm looking at you.
No, there was a big old truck on by the
So I want to ask you, how would you suggest getting younger people interested in voting?
So my experience, I've always been kind of a researcher and wanted to figure things out on my own, but I know that's not necessarily common in my age group. So making that voter registration as clear and easy as possible, making it clear what the benefits are of voting, I think would be important. Because it is so easy to just be like, oh, well, I won't register because, you know, it's not important and it's too much work and I don't want to go do it. And so I think just finding age relevant topics to kind of pull that group in, and then letting them know that their vote is, you know, kind of how those how those topics are going to affect them now and in the future, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Mhm.
I did a
Why is it
convers-
relevant to them?
Yep, I
They're
did a
very
conversation
my age
with-
and younger. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I did a conversation with some Girl Scouts who aren't old enough to vote, but we were talking about the suffrage movement, and one of the things I asked them was, would you be okay if all the decisions in your household were made by your brother and your dad? What to eat, where to go, what games to play? Would you be okay with that? No, they were not. So yes, I agree that putting it in an age relevancy
Right.
can really make it personal.
Yeah, just in my experience, I've done a lot of research on the different age groups. You know, if you're boomers, if you're Gen X, Zennial, Millennial, whatever the new one is. Just having knowledge of that audience, that target audience group. Same with promoting any concept, is know your audience and make sure that you're targeting them with something relevant to that audience, like Amy mentioned.
Not just, and to back that up too, the
great.
buy-in has to be presented in a relevant way. Am I right? In other words, the boomer, I'm a boomer and somebody is a whatever you said, but the way that people communicate and how they hear is way different, Amy. I can communicate and understand in almost like language, if you can, the Gen X and so on, because I had training, and so on and so forth. But being able, like Jessica is saying, being able to make it relevant and communicate it in the way that they prefer. I have people will text me, say, I don't want to text you, send me an email. Well, I don't have email. What? You know, everybody is different, and being able to tap into that is really a skill.
Mhm.
One of the things we haven't talked about is the role, it's kind of the elephant in the room. What do you think are the role of the political parties in this process in terms of encouraging people to vote, getting out the vote? Do the political parties have a place in this process?
Well, I would say that they have a prominent place in it, and some of them are taking the, to help more people to vote, and then seem some to have fewer people to vote. So they all have some kind of role that they're playing. The question is, how do they play that role, I think.
Now, maybe we could talk about that a little bit.
Well, go ahead.
Well, I think having worked in when my husband was mayor, we didn't have a machine. We had an organization, okay? And, machine politics sort of has a bad name. And I'm wondering, is there a role for, quote, an organizational effort to get out the vote?
Well, I think
Or is this an individual process?
Well, I think the League of Women Voters is one of the organizations that's doing that. That said, that there's no reason why someone else who had an organization, even if it's a coffee club, couldn't be.
We have found that even employers play a role. If you can encourage your employees to vote without necessarily maybe telling them how to vote, but encouraging them to, giving them opportunities. If you come to the office with the I voted sticker on, you can wear jeans for the day. There's lots of ways that different organizations, employers can encourage this, putting up posters on how to vote. How do you get an absentee ballot? Giving them time off to vote obviously is important as well. There's lots of different organizational ways that all sorts of organizations, even non-political organizations, can assist in the get out the vote effort.
I want to bring up I would like to bring up a very interesting study and practice that I saw that was done in England, that it had to do with how to get people to pay their taxes, because they were finding out there were a lot of people who weren't paying their taxes. And it wasn't like some big tax that you could make a justification to go after them legally. There were a lot of little taxes that weren't being paid. And you could go after those people or send somebody and create a process, but you end up spending more money to get that money than you would get back in taxes. So they were looking for another way to encourage people, to encourage people's behavior. And they looked at some of Richard Thayer's work, who is a behavioral economist. And what they found from that is that people have a certain herd mentality. And if they feel that everybody's doing it, you can drag a lot of people along with that. So that's where I think that Alphonse's idea of I plan to vote, that can be a very effective strategy to get people included in that. So I just throw that out. So
Well, if you're looking at research, you can also point to the idea that you need to have so many touches in order to change someone's behavior. So saying it once may not be effective, saying it twice may not be effective, but I believe it's 7 or 13 or some large
12.
number.
It's
Thank
12.
You. The number of times somebody would need to see the message in order to internalize that message or to remember that message is a large enough number that you can't do things once and expect to change. So yes, can political parties do this? Yes, and then their employer does it, and then their neighbor does it, and then their family does it. And once everybody's talking about it, that herd mentality, yes, can come into play.
Yes, the 12 was what I learned in marketing, was the number of times you had to run a newspaper ad before people noticed it. And the mantra was, if you're not going to run it 12 times, save your money, because it's probably not going to pay off for you. So there are a few other things. After we vote, then we have people in office, and a lot of people say, well, I'm not going to vote because they don't listen to me anyway. I'd like to if you could say something about, one, what does it mean when someone says, well, nobody listens to me, and two, what are the kind of strategies that you can use to get politicians to be responsive to you?
One of the tactics I encourage quite a bit is the personal story. Throwing a lot of statistics out to a politician who's getting, hundreds of emails a day doesn't seem to be effective. If you can attach a personal story and bring forth something that either happened to yourself or someone that really can make the issue about a human being, not about a number, that can be much more effective than anything else you can do. And knowing how to contact them. Our state does a very good job of, on the Legislative Research Council website, you're able to put in your information and find out who your legislators are, how you can contact them, and so forth. And local cities can do that as well. Make it very easy to contact your city council members, your county commissioners, and so forth. Part of the issue we see is not knowing where to go with the topic. If you have problems with your streets, contacting your state legislature does nothing. It is your city council that does that topic or deals with that topic. So being aware of those things is also important.
How does one become aware of that? And I'm thinking of people who, look, they're just starting. They've not been in politics. They go to their job. They, might go to their church. When they come home, play some video games, watch TV, rinse and repeat, you know? So now we say, hey, you know, why don't we get involved? Because now they realize that something happened in their house. Maybe there's a fire and they realize there's no fire hydrant near my house. And now that's why my insurance was expensive. And also that's why my neighbor's house burned down or my house burned down because there was no fire hydrant. What do I do? On that level, how do they start, or how could they start?
Sure. Reaching out to anyone that you know that's active in politics is a great first step, and acknowledging that you don't know who to contact for that. Saying you might not be the right person, but can you direct me to that right person? And following up with that, it can go a long way to just asking someone.
Mm-hmm. What's a good approach to politicians? To, you know, you're going to write a letter, you're going to call them. What works?
Well, I can tell you what doesn't work is the screaming and yelling that seems to be pervasive in a lot of places today. I know many politicians who have told me, I just stop listening if they use vile language or are screaming. It's just like talking to anyone else. These are human beings that we're dealing with. Being passionate, of course, that is effective, but the screaming and yelling, not so much. Politeness gets you a long ways, but there's a time to not be polite as well. And just remembering that you're dealing with a human being, and anytime you're dealing with a human being, that how you present your argument is going to affect how they listen as well.
Mm-hmm. How about, you know, bringing your posse, so to speak, or having other people write the same letters, or, you know, because maybe they have a personal story too, but they talk about it at coffee, but they just complain about that politician at coffee, but they never say anything to that politician or maybe their competitor.
Sure. The League of Women Voters on all levels has ways we send out action alerts and say, here's a sample letter to send, but make sure to personalize that sample letter. Because if you get 50 letters that look the same way, it's effective in just the sheer numbers, but they aren't going to read all 50 of them if they all look exactly the same. So you need to be able to personalize your story.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of getting people involved, I just remembered that I have a friend, a very dear friend, who told me that she had signed on to this group who were sending individual postcards to people, random people, to say, I hope you vote, or something like that. And they had the script already. They had like a whole bunch of scripts, so they wouldn't necessarily be the same thing, because a lot of people, they don't write because they don't really think they know what to say, you know, or they don't think that they can communicate well, so they don't say anything. So just like a lot of people don't say anything because they think, well, I'm going to look stupid. Other people don't mind. You know, they look stupid too. So why not you? But she said, she was talking about the impact of writing a postcard. That's a handmade postcard. That's what she was doing, making handmade postcards and sending them to people. And I know from a personal experience that has a very big impact, because we do a similar thing in the prison, where we send out, we call them cards of compassion. Like if somebody's brother dies, or their mom, you know, has cancer, or one of their homies get murdered or something, we have a group that I work with in the prison who they make handmade postcards, and you know, through our prison network, we get them that little postcard, and I mean, it's like a greeting card, and people like, that's one of the most important things we do, as far as like getting people to, let's say, normalize compassion in the prison, we can see the impact that makes. So I'm just saying, like, you know, sending somebody a postcard, even if they don't know you, maybe especially if they don't know you, and they get this postcard, and it's a regular postcard. It's not a campaign. It's not a party postcard. It's not saying vote for anybody. It's just saying, hey, voting is important, and, you know, we're all in this together, and, you know, I hope you exercise your right to vote, because, you know, we need that. You know, we need
one league in another state did something with that combined with kids. What they had done was with high schoolers, they had the high schoolers who were too young to vote make postcards for their neighbors and their families saying, I'm too young to vote, but you're not, kind of thing. Make sure you get out to vote. And getting a handwritten anything from a kid is pretty effective. And it lets the child know that they have power. It lets the person who receives the card know that kids are watching them. It reminds them to do something. I thought that was a great campaign that one of our leagues in another state was doing.
Great. Barb, did you have something you wanted to say? Well, your mic's off.
No, I don't think so. I'm good. I'm enjoying this call.
Okay. All right. I thought you were raising your hand. You wanted to say something.
No.
I'm going to open it up now. If you guys have any questions to ask Amy, because we're getting near the end of our call. But if you have any questions or ideas that you have for Amy, have at it.
Lawrence here. Last year, the Sioux Falls League of Women Voters started working on this effort to get redistricting legislation going in the legislative session, and that kind of died in the COVID hit. I was kind of wondering, are you planning on picking that up again this year or next year?
Yes, what Lawrence is talking about is an effort to implement an independent redistricting commission in South Dakota. And that effort has not died. It is being worked on very hard. Right now, we had introduced a House Joint Resolution in 2020, so just before COVID hit, that died in committee. And we are now going through the petition process, which the petition process in South Dakota time-wise takes a long time. We can't start until November to collect signatures. Then we will have a year to collect signatures, and then it will be on the ballot in 2022. So we are still working hard on that. What redistricting is every 10 years after the census, the lines are drawn for your legislative districts in South Dakota. And how those lines are drawn can affect who you are able to vote for. And nationwide, the League of Women Voters is working very hard to make sure that process is done transparently. It is done without party leanings. And in South Dakota right now, our legislators get to draw their own lines. Our legislators get to pick their voters. They are able to draw the lines around, I want these people voting for me. And we don't think that's fair. We want to give the power back to the people and by doing that, we will have a more fair and transparent process. So we are working on a petition. We have a coalition of 18 member organizations. If you want to check out our website, it is drawntogethersd.com. We also have a Facebook page, Drawn Together South Dakota. where we introduce the ideas of what is redistricting. It only happens every 10 years. And so it can be a process that a lot of people are not aware of. And it introduces the idea of gerrymandering, which is drawing the lines to benefit one candidate, one party, or just drawing the lines in a way that benefits a race can be gerrymandered. All of that can be issues when you're drawing those legislative lines. So we're working on a way to have an independent redistricting commission draw those lines in a way that doesn't look at political parties. It looks at just where are the people and how can we draw those lines.
Can
And
you get the women voters on there too, please?
Yes, our League of Women Voters website and Facebook page should be available. If not, let me know. So really that can also affect people voting. If you are continually voting and feel like you're not being heard, that is one place you can look is my district gerrymandered? Have the lines been drawn so that my voice is not effective? So that is one way to take a look at, how does my vote count?
What's a way that people on this call can spread the word about the League of Women Voters or get involved with you or help in your effort?
Well, the League of Women Voters, we accept members of all genders. So just because League of Women Voters, we do have members of all genders. So feel free to join our organization. On our website, there is an easy way to join that way. And watch for local things going on that are sponsored by the League. We are on social media, so you can see what's going on that way. And, talk to us. We have a lot of very interesting, diverse people in our League who have a lot of very good information. And a lot of League members that are new that may be looking for that same information and now have other League members they can lean on to find that information.
And
I have a question.
excuse me, young people too can join, although they're not old enough to vote. What is
Yes,
it,
we do have
16?
16, yep. As young as 16, and we do have student memberships too that are free or very low cost.
I have a question. Is the Blue Book online as well?
The what book?
Okay, well, I'm used to receiving a little blue book from the League of Women Voters here in Colorado that gives the positions of different candidates, etc. I don't know if
Sure.
that's something.
That is part of the Vote 411 website. A lot of our local leagues will print it out and pass it out. That's probably what you're getting in Colorado. In South Dakota, our league just plain doesn't have the money to print it out for all 35 districts in our state. But you can go online, the vote411.org. I see that was just shared in the chat there. And put in your address and you will be able to see the politicians that you will be able to vote for, as well as the ballot issues. We put on information about the ballot issues on Vote 411 as well. Have I said Vote 411 enough? Have I said it 12 times yet?
Did you mention Vote 411?
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Do you have meetings monthly, weekly? What are you doing now?
Our local leagues have different schedules, so they each set up their own. Once COVID hit, our monthly meetings in Sioux Falls came to a grinding halt just to see what was going on. We have now started doing them again through Zoom, and just had one with a former county auditor talking about the absentee process and how that is different this year. So So check with your local leagues and see what they're doing. They're usually open to the public, so feel free to join in. If you don't have a local league, let me know and we can work on setting one up in your area.
Jessica, I know you're putting up some things in the chat. Did you put up some contact information for Amy too? Or could you do that?
I don't have Amy's contact info,
Or
but
Amy, could you put it in the chat?
Yep, hang on.
Okay.
that'll work.
And now, if for those of you who are not familiar with this, down below, someplace you'll see something that says chat. If you click on that, you'll see a little pop-up window. And then on the bottom right-hand corner, there's 3 little dots surrounded by a round cornered square. If you click on that, you will see something, or you should see something that says save chat. And if you do, it should download to your computer. Now, those of you who are on phones, I have to say, I don't know how to do that because I don't have a smartphone. All my phones are dumb phones. I don't have any smartphones. So, but if anybody knows how to do it, maybe they could tell people how to do it. But there, Amy's information, her email is there. So I would encourage you to be in contact with her. Maybe if you don't have a League of Women Voters, you could start a chapter or find out which is a chapter that's nearest you, or maybe how you can get involved if you're, like on a mountaintop, or something, and don't have a dumb phone even. So. Oh, any other ideas, questions, or anything before we close this off?
I just want to say thanks.
Wow. Well, thank you.
You bet.
What's our meeting about next week?
It's a secret. What's on? We'll leave that to Ryan because he's got the schedule. I have it, but I don't have it popped up in front of my on my screen here, and it's on another computer. Ryan, do you have?
Yeah. So actually, next week we have Alphonse, who is on the call right now.
Okay.
We'll be discussing his book, Peace Education for Violence Prevention in Fragile African Societies, What's Going to Make a Difference.
Okay, great.
Okay.
That's also in the chat. You'll see that.
I have saved this so many times.
Okay. Great. Okay, well, with that, unless someone has something else, I'd like to thank Amy for participating with us today and bringing us some very interesting ideas and letting us know more about the League of Women Voters and why we should vote.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for having me, and thank you all for joining and for your information and ideas. It's been fun.
Thank you.
Some homework you could do, read about Tom DeLay's influence on the gerrymandering in the 1990s to line it up for one political party. Very interesting. Tom DeLay, he was found guilty from, okay. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Well, we'll see you all same time, same station. See you next week on a brand new show.
On a brand new. Bye.